That was the moment. And I like to hear that from a juror, because you can tell she's taking her job very seriously. And the jury taking the weekend to think about it. Is that normal? I mean, we usually get a lot of verdicts here on Fridays. So a lot of times jurors, I think, have the opportunity if they want to come back on Monday, but they usually want to get out of there on Friday. Let's bring in our expert from Cleveland, Ohio, criminal defense attorney Ian Friedman. Ian, great to see you. First of all, it seemed like they could have delivered this on a Friday, but some of the jurors wanted to think about it over the weekend. Are you surprised? Is that unusual?
Good to see you, Benny. I agree with you. Most of the time, they'd much rather get out of there, particularly because they were sitting there for the month, to know that they have to come back another week. But to me, and I think to all of us who kind of really understand trial, it really shows just how serious they took this. I'm glad they did. They were making a decision that would have affected so many lives. And so they said, you know what, we're not going to rush. Let's let it air a little bit. Let's see how we feel in a couple days. And that's really all they needed to do coming back Monday. So, agree with the verdict, disagree with the verdict. The one thing that I don't think anyone can contest is just how serious they took this.
Well, the defense will probably contest it at some point in some appellate motion somewhere, I'm sure, Ian. They seem to do that in this case. Let me, from your perspective, I mean, in Ohio, do they permit the attorneys to speak with the jurors afterwards? So do you have that experience?
They do. We do, yeah. I've spoken to many juries, not just in Ohio, but all around, yeah. And it is the greatest learning experience because, you think that what you presented is the way that they were analyzing the case, the jurors. And I can't tell you how many times I got back into the jury room and they started telling me what was important to them. And some of the things that maybe I felt were important, they didn't. And you just leave there wondering, were we in the same trial? So it's a great learning experience, win or lose.
Now, one of the things that this jury was subjected to were some photographs of Harvey Weinstein, naked photos of Harvey Weinstein. The defense argued that they were just trying to embarrass him and humiliate him. Here's what Juror 2 had to say about those photos.
Going inside some of what went on in the courtroom, lots of headlines came out of it, but one in particular was the showing of Weinstein's naked photos.
Yes.
What did you make of that? Did you think it was going too far?
I tried to block it out. It was presented to us, so it wasn't something that we could have blocked out, but it was just something like... And it's hard not to make a face and things like that, but...
What are your thoughts about those naked photos? Not that you've seen them, but the fact that the jury saw these photos.
Well, we always tell jurors this is going to be probably the most difficult task you'll ever have to perform. They have to come in there and do things that they could never imagine doing. From the defense perspective, we would argue that it is more prejudicial than probative. But here, there were descriptions of his genitalia, and so that's why the prosecutors were able to show it. But it's difficult stuff. Everything that happened in that courtroom, the jurors will never, ever forget. And this juror, as she said, trying to block it out, she's not done trying to block it out. She's going to be blocking it out for a long time.
Now, a big part of this verdict was there was a predatory count, which would have subjected him to the potential of life in prison. But to get a conviction there, they had to believe Mimi Haley and Annabella Sciorra. And they found him not guilty of those counts, but guilty of Mimi Haley. So for all of us looking at it, it was like, well, I guess the jury didn't believe Annabella Sciorra. Juror number 2 was asked about that. Let's take a listen.
Annabella Sciorra, why was her testimony ultimately unconvincing?
I wouldn't say that it wasn't convincing. It was very much so convincing to a lot of the jurors. I feel like the way things went for her, it was wrong. It was very much so wrong. And I just feel like hopefully with the verdict that we gave, she feels and she has some type of closure. Every last woman that took the stand, I wish them the best. I hope that this is now a chapter that they could close and move forward with their lives now.
That assessment of Annabella Sciorra's testimony, it seems like the defense got a break there. Because if there were some jurors that were convinced by Annabella Sciorra, count 1 at a minimum should have been hung. It shouldn't have been a not guilty.
Yeah, so I think it gets back to your point. The defense is going to certainly appeal. They're going to say that the 2 convictions didn't make sense, there was continued relationships and so forth. But I think that, and clearly the jury believed that. But what she's saying here is that this was the right kind of jury. This is the jury that you want. Jurors that may say, yeah, we believe it, it seemed credible, but it seems to me that they really upheld and really honored the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not enough to say, I believe it, or it probably happened, or it's likely that it happened. You have to be able to say that it happened beyond a reasonable doubt, utilizing a system of, or a level of consideration that you would use in the most serious of your own affairs. And that's what this jury did. So did they believe her? Sure, but they must have had a doubt, determined it to be reasonable, did the right thing.
What I heard, and again, you're a criminal defense attorney, I'm a former prosecutor.
Right.
You know, what I heard was that some of the jurors weren't convinced by Annabella Sciorra, but it seemed like juror number 2 was, as well as some others. And if that's the case, then he's a lucky man, because if count 1 is hung, right, they could say, listen, we can't agree on Annabella Sciorra count 1. He could have been retried for that.
Could have been, but again, in the back, and this would have been a long deliberation, 5 days, 30 hours, could have gone on the rest of the week. Sometimes the jurors in the back, you know, we talked about this last week. You never know what's going to happen in the back of back in the jury room. At some point, they say, look, we're not going to reach an agreement on this, and maybe they went one way. You just never know. So the 12 jurors who are in there are the only ones who know how they got from A to B in this one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to tell the defense how lucky they are, even though there was a conviction here.
and I'm going to push back a little bit and say that the jury just upheld the law as it was presented. They followed the instructions. That's the defense perspective, Eddie.
All right, now, the one video that people saw day in and day out in this case was Harvey Weinstein coming in and out of the courtroom using that walker. And obviously the jury's not watching television. They're not watching the clips of this. But that walker was actually inside the courtroom. And apparently, juror number 2 was asked about that. Let's take a listen.
In my mind, I'm thinking about his age and, you know, the things that he went through. It's like, okay, well, that's a walker.
It didn't change anything for you?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So, no impact. My guess is the defense wanted it to have a little bit of an impact, didn't they?
Yeah, I would say so. Now, with regard to that, I think the defense got very lucky because, you know, I felt that they should have been addressing that from minute one about how the trauma of being under these allegations in this trial beat him down. Because remember, when the women were testifying, they were saying he was this big, you know, big guy. He was so strong. And then he comes in bent over and he's got the walker. So I felt that they really should have hit on that a little bit more at the start of the case. The fact that juror number 2 said it didn't influence her, on that, I think that the defense got lucky. They really did, because that could have backfired by them not saying anything.
All right, I got to ask you one more thing about the health of Harvey Weinstein, because it became an issue after all of this, right? Can't go to Rikers because he's in Bellevue, because all of a sudden, right, now he's got chest pains after the verdict. I mean, at some point, I mean, it gets to, you know, yes, we're all skeptical, but it gets to be like beyond just skeptical. It's like ridiculous for a lot of people. His back surgery didn't work all of a sudden, and he's got chest pains. These are games, aren't they? It is what it is.
Like, it could be, right? I can't sit here and say one way or the other definitively, but what I will say is this. I have seen so many people wheeled out of courtrooms because of what the stress and the anxiety did to them on all sides of the aisle. The accused, the accusers, witnesses. People don't understand just how traumatic and stressful, and I call it a trauma, being involved in the court system. This guy had been undergoing it. Think what you want of him, but the impact that it has on him and the human body, I've just seen it too many times to automatically jump to the conclusion that it's all gamesmanship. I see it all the time. The last trial I had, I saw someone wheeled out thinking they were having a heart attack. This happens. We deal with life and death in these courtrooms, as you know. You've seen it, I've seen it, and so I can't say. If the doctors are saying he's got a real issue, I'm going to go with the docs on this one.
All right. Hopefully the doctors are doing the analysis, making him better so he can get over to Rikers. All right. Ian, stay with us. I got another story right in your backyard in Cleveland. Yeah. Some jail employees apparently in court for beating up an inmate, and it's all on video. That's next.